My name is Fumi Shiraishi. I guess my title here is VP of Production and Game Development. But for Volta-X, I was programmer, designer, and then producer on it. And it's a small project, so.
Yeah, I know. Title can be tricky when you have multiple things juggling. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah. We have a fairly small office, so like basically everybody does multiple things. So it's
so
nebulous.
Can you talk about where the idea for Volta-X came from?
It came quite a while ago. I think the direction I got from my CEO was that he wanted us to make a competitive like 1v1 versus game. So I think I probably came up with like 2 or 3 dozen like various ideas, and he liked the one that was kind of the weirdest. Originally, it was always like a simulation PvP game where you micromanage the little characters inside either robot or like a big ship or something, and then to fight each other. Eventually, I thought of like various different kinds of things that you could be inside of it. I did realize that around that time that like depending on the direction it went, it was eerily similar to FTL. So I decided against spaceships then, and it came down to like either robots or dinosaurs, like being inside like a thing in the back of a dinosaur kind of thing. Eventually we decided on robots because we thought that was a little more of a natural fit. And originally it was basically humans, but then like just felt a little bit uptight, and like maybe I don't know, it just didn't have the right vibe. But then like I think someone came up with the idea of maybe coming up with one of the other game ideas was actually a game about animals, so we combined the two, and so now we have animals inside robots.
Now, are you a dog humanoid person in this game or a cat humanoid person in the game? Like, what's your personal preference?
I am personally a cat person myself. So, in this game, like we have 2 protagonists. You can either be Ian, who is a fox, or you can be Lisa, who's a tiger. So, when I play, I always play as a tiger, but it's up to you.
It's funny you mentioned, like, because when I was playing, I was like, this is it's not exactly like FTL because I think it's a more simple, streamlined process. I think FTL, there's a lot more going on, and there's a lot more, like, it's almost overwhelming, where your game is not more simplistic, just more understanding. Like, I understand what's happening at any given time just looking at my Nintendo Switch screen. Where like FTL, I get overwhelmed almost instantaneously when like more than 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 things start happening. I'm like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. Can you talk about like how you address that issue? Because you do have to not only do you have to attack, you have to manage your crew inside the ship and move them around and keep track of things that are charging and attacks and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, so I think it just came from like rounds and rounds of prototyping. I do love FTL, and I think that was a great game, but like it is a single player game. I think it basically assumes you're gonna be playing most of the game paused, right? Like the way I play is like I pause FTL and then like I set everything and I unpause it for like 2 seconds and I pause it again and I change everything, So each battle could potentially take like dozens of minutes. Whereas for us, for Volta-X, it's a PvP game, so you can't pause unless you want your opponent to just wait where you choose. So we had to make it all real time, and in that sense, we had to like really like simplify it in a way so that it's understandable in real time, but like also balance keeping enough strategy in there so that it's jobs and there's things to think about.
It is interesting because, like, at its core, it's not like, it's kind of interesting because you look at the game from afar, you think it's turn-based, but it's definitely not turn-based. It's real time. Was there any point was there a reason you wanted it to be real time instead of turn-based? Is because the more interaction with the crew members and the managed mechanics?
We thought about turn-based. We definitely did, and actually internally, it's actually kind of implemented as a turn-based game. It's just that each turn is 0.1 second and it just goes really quickly. I think I'm just personally just interested in like simulating things in real time and like seeing like what kind of interesting strategies come out of it. I think we definitely did think about like making it turn-based, but like we wanted to explore, like say you have a robot with a lot of rooms. One of the so on one hand you have a lot of rooms, so you have a lot more firepower. On the other hand, like it takes a really long time for the crew to like walk from one hand to the other. And then just like exploring that in real time, I thought was a little bit more interesting than making it so it's turn-based. Not that you can't explore the same things in turn-based, but I thought it would feel a little bit more visceral if it's real time.
I feel like
think the other
adds more to it, and when it's real time, there's like more stakes at place, because you have to react accordingly. Even if it's slow, you still have to have a certain time period you need to react.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it adds like a sense of urgency, maybe, if it's real time. I have to admit, I think like several times people did suggest just going to like just making it turn-based. For whatever reason, I just wanted to make it real time. I thought it would be more interesting that way. I think it was like more of a gut feeling thing, maybe.
I think it's important because there are games that are turn-based. I mean, Pokemon's a huge one, right? But trying to watch that in an esport is very like, oh, you're waiting for that crit thing. You're waiting for them to select the attack, and you're waiting for the RNG to hit and see if it's a crit or a miss, and you're like, oh, damn, you know what I mean? Like, but something like StarCraft, which is a real-time strategy game where something that can't be paused, like you said, it adds a certain amount of urgency to the things. Like you can't just take however long you want to decide. You're given a timer, obviously, for things to recharge and move around, but it's still like you have to be on it. You know what I mean? This is a real-time game. And I think it's cool that you went that direction, because if you did make it turn-based, I mean, what sense of urgency is there if the other opponent could just wait indefinitely until you selected your move or moved your crew around, that kind of stuff. The whole design of it kind of falls apart when I think about it. At least based on what I played.
Okay. Well, okay. So I feel a little bit better now. Thank you.
Obviously, it's a mecha game. There's giant robots, and you have like a plethora of customization. How you can like treat these. You have different chassis and arms and laser cannons. Talk about how you can customize your own mech.
So we started with the different mechs, and we started by thinking about how we could make them different, not just visually, but also like strategy-wise. So. We have Warrior, who's kind of like our prototypical robot. He has like a rage ability, which makes him allows him to just go berserk at the very end of the battle. Compared to him, like we have Raiden, who just has a lot more rooms, but he has a lot of chest rooms, which tend to be not as offensive. But he's able to like have more like special tricks up his sleeve because he has like all these like chest parts. And then lastly, another character that we have is Brocken. We have the dev names and the actual names are different, so I keep on getting confused. Brocken has 4 hands, so he's able to like pummel his opponent because he could put like 4 drill hands or 4 rocket punches. So we started with that. We did come up with a roster of 6 robots. Making sure that each one is like unique and have its own play style. And then from there we came up with a bunch of weapons that we thought either complemented like one of the strategies that like the robots might have, or they're just like weapons that in this genre we just have to have. Like a rocket punch, like we just have to have one way or another, right? Like a drill punch we just have to have. We have to like come up with an excuse to have it. So I think we went from those two sides where we started with like what's interesting strategy wise and like what's interesting like fiction wise.
Is it difficult with so many parts and like obviously chassis, I call them chassis, and like pilots and stuff like that, to balance the game competitively, because it is a 1v1. Is it difficult to do that?
It is, and I think we've been constantly tweaking. I think we have a system where like right now we're pretty sure there isn't like any one dominant build. I think it is kind of like a rotating system where like someone comes up with like a dominant build, but then so that becomes popular for a while. But then there's always like another build that is able to at least counter that. So it is at least moving, but it does take time, and it's maybe in some ways the hard part is like you want some things to feel good, right? But then like you also don't want it to be overpowered, and I think the new mode, the Metaverse Mode, is in some ways an answer to that, in that like on that one we didn't have to worry about PvP, so we could just make things feel good in a way that fictionally made sense. And so that's kind of how we hedged it a little bit.
I mean, can you talk about like some of the inspirations when designing this game? I mean, obviously, like I thought Power Rangers, Voltron. I mean,
Mhm.
you talked a little bit like faster than light, but like I see a lot of Power Rangers Voltron in this. Like if like how do the Power Rangers control that Zord? You know what I mean? They all have controls in front of them. And you're like, how are they like organizing it? And this kind of game kind of shows you that a little bit, you know, like if each control was a room.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think and I don't know exactly how those things are controlled, but we just imagine like, what if it was like controlled this way, that you actually had to go to the hand and then like push a button to like make it fight, and then what happens if you get hit while you're in it? And we have a little sequence. It's kind of small, so hard to tell, but like with the rocket punch, you can see a guy like when he goes into a rocket punch, he actually sits on a seat, puts on a seat belt, and then like he goes flying with the punch also. You know, so we try to find humor in that. But yeah, Voltron, Power Rangers, those are definitely like huge influences. We also looked at a lot like Getter Robot and Mazinger Z. It's like the really old school giant robots. And then another one is Ultraman. I don't know if you're familiar with the TV series, but it's like an old Japanese TV series.
Oh yeah, I know Ultraman. Yeah.
There's no giant robots in that, but like in terms of aesthetics and like the feel of the era, like we got a lot of influences from that. Like I have a lot of Ultraman screenshots and stuff like on my computer. So.
And then on top of that, like you not only have your different weapons, your customization of the mechs themselves, but you also have like the crew members have their own like speed, hit points, like very, you know, RPG mechanics as well as abilities that you can like level up as you play. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So each character. So at a high level, like there's 3 different kinds of characters. We have like the melee guys, the range guys, and then repair. You can kind of tell from like the color of their costumes. Like what their roles are. That's like, you know, it's not 1-to-1, but we kind of got that hint from Ultraman and maybe from Star Trek a little bit. But then beyond that, each character has their own like skill tree, and then also their own like special abilities. Ultimately, I think like figuring out which character's special ability, like mixing character special abilities with the mechs, is like the big part of the game. It's not really important like when you first start the game, but like we have a few combinations that are really powerful. So for instance, like we have the monkey. He has his Moxie ability. Like basically when his attack finishes a part, like that part will immediately recharge to full. So like if you put him in a room with a drill punch, for instance, and then like you've kind of sanded down your opponent's rooms a little bit, then he can go on a roll where he like finishes off like 4 or 5 or 6 rooms like in a row. There's a little bit of setup required for that, but like basically we have a lot of combinations like that makes it interesting.
And then also like I have to mention, talk about your art style. It's very unique. The robots are in 3D, but all your characters and a lot of your set pieces are in a 2-dimensional plane, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was we tried a lot of combinations. We tried going full 3D. We also tried going full 2D, and then like a lot of like combinations in between. Ultimately, we landed with that because like it gave us just the right combination of like a hand-drawn feel, but still like the benefits of being able to customize and have a lot of different animations and movements and things like that. I think trying to make the robots 2D was a little bit too difficult in terms of customizing it. We tried making the characters 3D, so you can also that you can like customize the characters also. But then with they're kind of small on screen, so in 3D it didn't quite come across. So the result is just what we have is a result of just trying a bunch of different things.
Is there any particular challenges on the Switch? Because I know you have to make a handheld version as well as like a docked version, and handheld stuff can get smaller. I mean, there's text and numbers and stuff. Are there any challenges there trying to make handheld mode work specifically well for your game?
Yes. The prototype for the game was done in like using the mouse or the touchpad actually. So making the game work with the controller, like we weren't sure if it was going to work. Actually, like once we did it, it actually turned out to be fine. Actually, in some ways, I think depending on the person, like people, I think the controller actually is more natural if you're more of a console player. So that part was actually surprisingly easy. Yeah, the text sizes, especially in the handheld mode, we had to like change the UI quite a bit to like make the text fit and also be legible. Like some of the European languages are always a bit of a problem for that. Actually, other than that though, relatively like it wasn't that bad. I think in general, like the Switch is a good, like a fairly convenient platform to build on. We as a team, like we've gotten pretty good at developing for it. So I think it was actually not that bad.
Were you able to utilize the touchscreen on the Switch with your game at all in handheld mode?
Yeah, you could play with it. You could definitely play with the touch if you want to. So
Development time, right? To utilize the touchscreen on the Switch. You know what I mean? When it's just like, and it can only be used in handheld mode and not docked mode. So I mean, it's cool that you took the time to develop that function. A lot of studios don't bother with it.
yeah, I think when we first started, we thought that I guess Nintendo doesn't care as much, but yeah, for whatever reason, we thought that Nintendo would care a lot about it. So we tried.
I think that's funny because I think they felt the same way about the Joy-Cons. Like those things are like such an incredible piece of technology with like how they move. It's not just like a gyroscope. They have a bunch of these really cool features, and I don't think since they released the Switch, I think there's been no developer that's taken full advantage of those controls except for the first party Switch game that showed you what you could do with the controllers.
Yeah, and that's a good
Labo.
point.
It's just been first party stuff, you know?
Yeah, and just Dance maybe, but yeah, it's not a lot.
not a lot.
It's unfortunate actually. Yeah, I personally do like it when games make use of that kind of stuff, and so we tried. But we actually were looking into like using the Joy-Cons for fighting, but yeah, it was too much. Like that one we gave up on.
I mean, it's cool though, right? Like making the movements go, right? Making you feel like you're controlling the robot, like in what's it called, Pacific Rim. Rim.
Yeah. ARMS does use the Joy-Cons, although I have to admit with ARMS, like I eventually decided I just prefer to use the control rather than the hand motions. But
yeah, that's another first party game, right? It's so rare for third party developers to utilize this stuff, which is funny because it's like I said, like you only have so much time, and it's like, do you want to spend time and money and energy doing this thing when it can work just as well with the controller, or just, you know what I mean? But it's an interesting concept. You always, as a developer, you always have to weigh that cost and that time, right? Is it worth doing this or X, Y, Z, whatever it is, whether it's controls or touchscreens or whatever specifically for the Switch? And sometimes the answer is no, because you want to focus on making a fun game first, and then all the superfluous stuff that may add to the experience afterwards, you know?
Yeah.
Do you plan on any DLC, more chassis, more characters, more items post-release?
Well, so the one that's coming up now is like it has a ton of new stuff in it. We added 2 chassis. We added, I don't know exactly how many, I think 6 or 7 new weapons. We added a whole Metaverse Mode, which is like so the original game is online. It requires online. Now like you play it, there's an entirely offline mode. Right now, we're gonna be in like kind of like a wait and see approach. We're gonna get this out. Hopefully there's not bugs or issues with it or balance changes. If there are, we'll make those fixes first, and then I guess depending on that, we'll decide what to add next.
It always fascinates me with games like yours, specifically with Volta-X. Stuff like this lends itself so well to transmedia, cartoons, Netflix series, comics, stuff like that. Is any plans to take this thing that way? Because I feel that it would fit so well. You have colorful characters and a fun premise and a good story. And
thank you. We definitely want to. We've pitched the idea to a few people. We just haven't had like a good. It just hasn't happened yet. But we definitely want to try. So it's something that we're gonna continue to explore, I think.
So what's next for you and your studio or Volta-X? Like, what are you guys working on now? What's in the pipeline that you're allowed to talk about?
So we do have another project that we're working on right now that we have a lot of like open positions for. So we're actively hiring. But that one, unfortunately, we can't talk about it. It is for the consoles. It's actually quite a bit bigger game than Volta-X. So we're both excited and a little bit scared at the same time. And then Volta-X, like we said, like we just finishing the current update. The most important thing is that we added what we're calling the Metaverse Mode. It is 100% an offline mode. It is a roguelike experience. We've focused on the fiction and the lore and the customization of the robots for that. And we think it feels very different. It feels like a completely new game compared to what was in there before. So we're very proud of that, and we hope that a lot of people have fun with it. But then we've also added 2 new Voltas to the game as well. We're adding Valkyrie and Irontail. Valkyrie is another transformer, so she transforms from a tank to a robot. And then Irontail is another female robot. She has 9 tails that she could use. Like her special gives her a lot of elemental abilities. I think they're both fun to use. They're very different than the Voltas that we had already. So hope people enjoy them. On top of that, we've added new weapons. So we have the blaster cannon, black hole beam, nano machine, the destroyer, the ice launcher, the auto turret. Like I think they just, I'm not gonna go through all of them now, but each one kind of adds another dimension to the game. So they're quirky and they're weird, but I think they're interesting to play around with and try it out. And then lastly, I think the community's been asking for a lot more just like content in general. So we've added a lot of content, even in the existing, like the online mode. There's content that is like post-boss content that is quite meaty. Basically, there's content to fill like all the different ranks that the online mode provides. So in terms of like pure number of hours of gameplay, like we've added dozens, I think. Hopefully people enjoy them. And then information about that, there'll be, they can go to the Steam page or the Nintendo Switch eShop page. We'll be updating our website, so all the information will be there too.
And Volta-X is out now on Nintendo Switch and is also on PC as well, I believe, right?
Yes, Switch and Steam, and also the Humble store.
And then any plans for Xbox, PS4, PS5? Wait and see how well it does on the Switch and PC, and then maybe.
Yeah. I think we're gonna have to wait and see how it goes.